Okay, chapter 7 is page 322. 322 in your Chumashim. We're going to look at 3 or 4 psukim at the opening, then we'll kind of ask the question, and then we'll kind of get back and try and make sense of it. Okay. Very famous question. So God says to Moses, saying, I've made you Elohim LeFaro. Elohim here means a leader. A master does not mean a deity. And Aaron Achicha will be your Niviecha. He will be your prophet or your spokesman. By the way, a Navi is normally a prophet. Here they translate a spokesman who will speak on behalf of you. You'll say to Pharaoh everything that I command you. Aaron Achicha will speak to Paro, and he will send the Jewish people out from his land. And then in verse 3, and here comes the key verse, and I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and I will multiply my signs, my wonders in the land of Egypt. Pharaoh is not going to listen to you. I'm going to put my hand against him, and I'm going to take out my host from the land of Egypt, etc., 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 etc. And then Egypt will know that I'm God. So in verse 3, God says what? I'm going to harden the heart of Pharaoh. What does that mean?
He's going to make him stubborn.
Make him stubborn.
Take away his free choice.
Take away his free choice. Take away his free will. That's pretty much what it seems like, doesn't it? Yep.
Not completely.
Well, how completely is it going to take it away, and how not completely is he not going to take it away?
He's still got to make a choice somewhere.
Pharaoh has to make a choice?
Yeah, even after that, he still has to make a choice, whether to let them go or not.
Well, God says eventually he'll make the choice, but God says I'm going to harden his heart that he will be obstinate. I'm not.
Yeah, but after that, he still has to decide.
Well, at the end of the story, he lets him go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was his choice.
But it means that, what about the choice after the first plague, or choice before the first plague? What's God saying here? Isn't God saying that I'm really not going to let him make a choice? When you read it differently and tell me what it means, but it seems that's what it means when I read it. I will harden Pharaoh's heart. I shall harden Pharaoh's heart.
Yeah.
Okay?
That even if he wanted to make a good choice, he still wouldn't be able to.
Because
his heart is hardened now.
So
hardened means to be negative.
Right, so it's negative that he will say no.
Right.
So that's not giving him free choice.
Right.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah.
We're all saying that seems to be now. If we believe that there is free will, how does God monkey with the system? Or why would God monkey with the system? And more importantly, if God takes away Pharaoh's free will, then how is it possible that Pharaoh could be culpable for what he did and let the Jewish people go?
Right.
Well, he gave Pharaoh three times a choice to do what he needed to do, and he didn't.
Right.
So God's like, I'm striking you down now.
You had your choices and you had your chance, and now you're out.
Yeah.
Now you lose your choice. That's going to be one of the answers of the Ramban, and one of the answers that's often given. Correct.
It's the way parents bring up their children, right? Do this or...
Yeah, but when children get older, that's what adolescence is. When children get older and start making their own decisions, and it happens around the age of 15, 16, and they start making their own decisions, they sometimes do things differently than what the parents told them. Because as children, as youngsters, they don't have that ability to make decisions. They simply mimic what they hear at home.
Right.
If you teach elementary school and kids come in and start telling you politics, you know they heard it at home. They don't make it up. It's not their decision. But as they get into university, it is their decision. So, look, this is the response that every war criminal says. He says, I had no choice.
That's right.
I was simply following orders. Does that reduce culpability? And the answer is, well, if he really had no choice, yes, but at some point you have to make a choice and say there is an absolute evil that you can't do.
My question is Pharaoh unique amongst human beings, or does Hashem do this with? Who does Hashem do this with?
Everyone.
That's what I'm bothered by this.
Why would
the Torah talks about Pharaoh, but is Pharaoh unique because his sins were so much greater?
Well,
the average Joe?
Let's read about what Ramban says, and then we can decide, do we think that has application for other people too? Do we think that's applicable to one person? Is it a one-time deal, or do you think that it actually could be played around for other situations as well? Okay, it's a good question. But what we're going to actually focus on first is seeing what the actual pasuk means, which talks about Pharaoh, then we can see if there's any way to kind of bring it further. Is that fair? Okay, so that's our Ramban for today. This is the most important Ramban we're going to do today. And let's see. Here we go. There's a copy of one English version here. I don't have too many more English versions. So,
Is that the Ramban?
this is Ramban in Hebrew, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
There's another Ramban in Hebrew. Okay, we only have the two English ones today. So what page are you on? 7?
135.
135 for you, Jeff. You got it. And
134, 35.
and then Zion is beginning of Perek Zion on the Ramban. Shintet. Okay. You find it. Okay. Okay. Shintet. 12 Zion. That's it. All right. Top of this page. Okay. Now let's see. I'll get you the same. Well, you don't have to look at the same. You can look together, or you can read it separately for the same price, because we have copies of the English. Okay. So here we go. Shintet. There you go. Top of the left page. Vaniach shed le paro. So says the Ramban. Amru b'midrash Rabbah. So the Midrash Rabbah says, Gila lo shehu atid l'chazek et libo, that when God tells Moses here, before going back to Pharaoh, that he will harden his heart, he's telling him what will happen in the future. Bavur lasot bo hadin, tacha shevidam hevidam be'avoda chazaka. In order to bring strict justice upon Pharaoh, because of the fact that he enslaved the Jewish people with very harsh work. Okay, so in other words, what the Midrash Rabbah is suggesting, that the reason Pharaoh is being punished and his free will is being taken away is because he just didn't enslave the Jewish people. He actually enslaved them with harsh labor. And so part of the reason why this is happening is Pharaoh went beyond the measure. I think what the Midrash Rabbah is trying to say is if God promised that the Jewish people would go down. Are you in the right place?
Yeah, no, I'm looking to, because it's before that Pharaoh took away the straw.
Right.
Like he went
beyond.
Yeah.
So, but I think what the Ramban is really trying to say by quoting this Medrash is, the Medrash is bothered by the fact that God had promised Abraham that your descendants will be in a strange land and they'll be enslaved, and then I will take them out. So, all Pharaoh is doing is really carrying out the will of the Almighty. What makes him culpable? What makes him culpable altogether? So the Medrash says, well, he could have enslaved them, and that would be fine, but he enslaved them beyond what he needed to enslave them.
Hold on.
But why would that have been?
But just because Hashem says that, so what? Hashem is forecasting what will happen.
Right.
He's forecasting what will happen because this man's
So
going to do it.
Right. So that would be a better answer, that Pharaoh doesn't know what Hashem had predicted. Right. There are other answers, by the way. The other answer that could come up is God does not say where they will be enslaved. God simply tells Abraham, your descendants will be enslaved in a strange land. He doesn't say they'll be enslaved in Egypt. The fact that Pharaoh says, I'm going to step up to the plate and I'm going to be the one to enslave them, that's his decision. If Pharaoh hadn't enslaved them, so God could have chosen somewhere else. Who knows? Deepest Africa, Ethiopia, who knows where they would have gone. So, but the Medrash which the Ramban is quoting as a source is referring to the fact that Pharaoh gave the Jewish people extremely difficult labor, and therefore the punishment why he's being punished, and we can argue on this, but the punishment why he's being punished is not because he enslaved the Jewish people, but because he enslaved them with avodah kasha, with difficult work. V'yocham, another part of the Medrash says, Ki aniach barati et libo, the Medrash says that I harden his heart. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Mikan pitchom pen laminim lomar, shlo itam mimeno shi'asu tshuva. Some of the meaning, he calls them heretics, some of the disbelievers can use this argument that God says, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart, and he says it here, Aniach shet le Pharaoh. He says it later on in chapter 10, I'm going to achbarti et libo, I made his heart harsh, that God took away from Pharaoh the ability to do tshuva. So that's the second question the Medrash is trying to deal with. And anyone who wants to kind of poke a hole into the story of what Judaism believes in will say, well, you see, God's not fair. Pharaoh's choice was taken away because God set him up for this. He set him up, and the answer is, well, he didn't set him up because he didn't have to work them that hard. He didn't know who it was. He set him up because he took away his choice. Well, that's a really good argument. Because God says clearly, I'm going to harden his heart. Now that you made the decision, I'm going to harden your heart that you can't let them go. So anyone who is a min, anyone who is a disbeliever, anyone who's going to question, or who's not going to want to believe, will use this as an argument against the foundations of the Jewish people, one of which is free will. Who says it? Rabbi Yochanan. And in the Medrash, Rav Shimon Lakish responds and said, Yisotem PM Shalminim, that the people who are going to raise questions of them, they don't really have a leg to stand on. In the Leitzim Hu Yalitz, if they're scoffers, they'll scoff. People who want not to believe will find all kinds of reasons. Why don't they have a real reason for this? So says the six quotes, God warned him once, God warned Pharaoh twice, God warned Pharaoh a second time, and he didn't change. At that point, God took away his ability to make a decision rationally and properly. So therefore, in other words, you get three times at the bat, and then you're out. If you strike out, then you lose your opportunity to go back to the bat.
I just wonder whether he would have made a better choice if it was Hashem who really spoke to him, and not through Moses. It wasn't God saying to Pharaoh, let the people go. It was Moses saying, God says, let the people go.
Correct.
And he doesn't know what God is. He doesn't.
So he
what
doesn't.
Is God? His gods are his gods.
So he doesn't know.
Your God.
Correct. But so that's why the first, second, and third time, he hears what it is. He sees plague 1, 2, and 3. And he realizes this God, it's not just that God is not speaking to Pharaoh. Moses says tomorrow there'll be blood. Tomorrow there will be Tzfardea, there'll be frogs. Tomorrow there'll be lice. And guess what happens tomorrow? There's lice, there's frogs, and so forth. So you see that God is able to, Moses is either a really good magician or else he is representing a good God.
Because they show us that at the beginning when he throws his staff down, and the Egyptians do the same thing. So they're able to say, well, we can do those things too.
Are you saying that
they couldn't have brought the first the plagues?
I'm not,
Are you saying God should have spoken directly to Pharaoh?
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
Angels have spoken to non-Jews. You see the angel speaking to Hagar.
Right.
Why doesn't an angel speak to Pharaoh?
Excellent
we
question.
see this with other kings, right?
So the answer is that maybe sometimes a human being can be more forceful than even an angel. Angels are hard to communicate with. Or angels come in dreams.
Yeah.
When God appears to the Avot, appears to the patriarchs, how does he appear to them? Why don't you ask that question?
Moses was the only one who saw face to face.
Moses is the only one who sits face to face and talks like God. You and me are like Moses and God. Okay? Right. But the patriarchs, how do they see God?
Through dreams.
Through dreams. Now, when you have a dream and you wake up in the morning, what do you say? That was a bad dream.
Or that was a good dream.
That was a good dream. But it's still a dream. So it may not be, you have to be receptive enough to know what the dream is.
Yes.
I never, you listen to your dreams, you wake up in the morning, you're doing things, because partial dreams are part of what your subconscious is playing around with.
Right.
The only time I ever listened to a dream is I had a dream that my tefillin was puzzle.
Yeah,
I told you that, right?
Yeah.
So I had them checked out, but they were fine. That's the only time I said, you know what, that's already dealing with high tension. Let's deal with high pressure.
The part where Abraham and Sarah go in and the king wants her. And God speaks directly to him and says, do not touch the woman.
Probably a dream.
Okay, but I'm saying here, with Pharaoh, he sends a messenger.
Yeah. It's a good question. It's a good question.
An answer it could be that this wasn't just for Pharaoh's sake. In other words, this is also for the Jewish people. In other words, by putting it in the hands of Moshe, they elevated Moshe's status within the Jewish people, rather than just Pharaoh saying, okay, I'll free you. If there's like a private dialogue between Pharaoh and God, and he decides he's going to free the Jews, then the Jews become responsible to God, or to the Pharaoh.
And in fact, the Jews do not really hear God's voice. The only time that Jewish people are communicated to by God directly is at Sinai. The purpose of being at Sinai is not just to get the Ten Commandments. The purpose of being at Sinai is not just to accept the Ten Commandments, but to have a theophany, to hear and communication with God. And where do they hear it? How do they hear it? What do they hear? They hear it in here. They don't hear it in the ears.
Right.
So, but that's what makes it unique. But the rest of the Torah is basically God speaks to Moses, Moses speaks to the people.
That's true.
But you're right, it's a good question. Why does God not appear in some form? Dan, you want to say something?
I always had this philosophical idea about this, that what we must have free will, right? So therefore God cannot intervene in our lives all the time. But there was a need for a one-time proof, one-time open miracles, and do it in such a way without destroying them completely, but ripping on them so they will understand that there is a God and God does miracles. And that's the story of Pesach. That's why we have Seder, to remember that one time, and not only us, the whole world.
Good.
God could have just taken everybody, all the Jews up in the air and transported to Har Sinai. That's not
So that, what you just said is actually the discussion, the statements of the Ramban at the end of Parshat Bo. As the people are about to go out, the Ramban says the story of the Exodus is to show that there are miracles, and the fact that you see overt miracles tells you that some things that don't look like miracles are also miracles. Life is a miracle, and we can apply it in our own lives as well. Even though God doesn't split the sea in half for us, even we don't see thunder and lightning come down and the Ten Commandments pop out of the sky. It's right, but I think there's a message there that we don't always have to see a miracle to understand the role of God. Right. But at any rate, I think it's a valid question to say why God does not appear to Pharaoh, but he does not. Moses appears. And the question we're trying to deal with, therefore, is why is it that Pharaoh's free will is taken? So what the Medrash seems to say is that, and the Ramban is going to explain this, that you give a person a number of chances, and part of their punishment is, or the way the Medrash says, after a couple of chances, or a few chances, 3 chances, you lose the ability. And says the Ramban, so Kevan Paro Harasha, same thing happened with Pharaoh. Kevan Sheshigar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Etzlo Chamesh Pimim V'Loshkiach Al Dvarav. Seeing God gave him 5 chances, not 3 chances, 5 chances. Then he didn't listen to it. Amalah HaKadosh Baruch Hu Atoh Hiksheita Et Arpecha. You hardened your back or your heart. V'Chbata V'Becha. You hardened your heart. Hareini Mosif L'cha Tuma Tumatecha. I'm actually going to make you become more obstinate. I'm going to make you more impure upon the impure. I'm going to make sure that you don't change your mind now because you had the opportunity to make a valid decision. In other words, part of the punishment of Pharaoh is the fact that if he had the choices and didn't make them, part of what happens as a consequence is he loses those choices. And in fact, Ramban points out, and we're about to read it, that if you look at the first 5 plagues, it does not say that God hardens Pharaoh's heart. Right. It says Pharaoh hardens his heart. Pharaoh makes a decision rationally, comes to a decision. I'm not going to let the Jewish people go. When you get to plague number 6, that's the first time it says that I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart. And that's what the Medrash is really commenting on. So when we started reading this Ramban, one of the first words that Ramban quoting the Medrash is that God appears to Moses saying, in the future, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart. Not at this point before you go for plague number 1. Gilalo, God appeared to reveal to Moses.
So he already knew that he was going to do that.
So
in the future, I'm going to harden his heart.
So that actually indicates that God believed that he wouldn't let the people out.
Yeah.
Right. Right. That's actually a good question because you assume that the choice was there to go out after plague 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Right. The other thing, and we'll come to this, I wanted to come to a Nesiva Shalom with you today about it, but then when we look at the 10 plagues, we look at them as a unit. You can look at the 10 plagues, you can divide them into 3 triads. The first 3, the second 3, the third 3. They represent different parts of nature. But that all assumes, of course, that you had all 10. If we're just reading the story now for the first time, we don't know what's going to happen. What would happen if God would let the Jewish people, Pharaoh would let the Jewish people out of plague 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? You wouldn't have that whole sequence of 10. The answer is, yeah, possibly. Okay, but the fact that he was in for the whole game means that all 10 are part of a unit. But you're right. So it's possible that God is telling Moses that he was not going to let him go out, but he's not hardening his heart. So the first answer to Ramban therefore is really that he had 5 chances or 5 plagues to make his own decision rationally, and part of the punishment is God takes away his free choice. Okay.
Which is what slaves are, right? They
Correct.
also have lost their free choice.
Right.
So he's bringing them down to that same level.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see Right, let's see the Ramban, okay? Let's continue on the Ramban. Hinei Pershu b'sheila she'shelot kol. This Medrash, which I just quoted to you, is asking the question that everybody asks: Im Hashem hekshot libo ma pisho? If God hardens Pharaoh's heart, what's his guilt? What did he do wrong? V'yesh bo shnei tamim u'shnei memet. There are two answers that you can give, and he's now going to give you two separate answers. Number one, hu'echad kipar b'risho asher asal Yisrael rot gedolot chinam. Pharaoh, who did a lot of things bad against the Jewish people on his, beyond the letter of the law, because he did more than he needed to do, so God punished him by taking away the ability to do tshuva. In other words, Pharaoh is being punished at the beginning of the plagues is because when he enslaved the Jewish people, even though he was carrying out the will of the Almighty, he did it with a lot of gusto. In other words, he didn't just follow orders; he went beyond the level of law.
Yeah.
Right? In fact, a lot of these prosecutions of Nazis is proving that they did not simply follow the letter of the law. Less about Hitler than about those who were on his underlings. Right? In other words, all these, when they find these guards and we're running out of people are dying before we can bring them to justice. But all these cases are not about the fact that he was a guard, but the fact is how he actually persecuted Jews in the camps, or that person persecuted Jews in the camps.
When we were speaking about Hanukkah,
yes,
and the ways of lighting the candles, and one level is better than another level, right? You can light one candle, or you can light a candle each day, or you can light.
So same thing with Avera.
It's a level, right?
Correct.
So the people who light many menorahs with many lights is supposed to be a higher level person. So this guy, he does it with gusto.
With the gusto, right?
So when Pharaoh does it with gusto,
correct,
he gets punished.
That's the first approach the Ramban is explaining in the Medrash, or the Medrash is explaining that the reason Pharaoh was punished because he went, not because he enslaved Jewish people, that's normal. Yes, slavery was acceptable. He enslaved them with very harsh, brutish, negative persecution types of work. Takes away straw from them and expects them to do them. He expects them to build, whatever it is. There's nothing wrong inherently in having a people who are working for you. This is the society of the ancient world. So as a result, because of that, he's punished for enslaving the Jewish people at a harsher level than he needed to enslave them. That's the first approach of the Medrash, okay, which may not satisfy you completely. The second answer is, and this is what we just talked about a few minutes ago, the Ramban reviews, the second answer is, the first half of the Makot, the first 5, it only says, and he quotes the verse in chapter 7 and a number of times in chapter 8, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. He hardened it. Or it says, Pharaoh hardened his heart. So in all of these cases, we have, Ramban actually tells you that all of the first 5 plagues, it says one of two terms. Either it says, Pharaoh's heart was hardened internally, or it says, Pharaoh hardened his own heart directly. It's talking about Pharaoh. God is not a part of this process. He didn't want to send the Jewish people on his own to respond to God. Only when the plagues got harsher, and at that point, when he would have been able to actually maybe not be able to tolerate them, and maybe he would have actually considered letting the Jewish people, his heart became soft. So at that point, after number 5, God says, you know what, I'm going to harden your heart. Your punishment for not letting the Jewish people go in the first 5, part of your punishment is, I'm going to harden your heart, and you can't let them go.
Was Pharaoh the ultimate exploiter or the ultimate anti-Semite? I look at a Hitler as the ultimate anti-Semite. He just didn't want the Jews around. But Pharaoh was a businessman, and he wanted the Jews to do their job. He also didn't want them to get too powerful. What does the Torah say about that, Moshe? What are the commentaries about Pharaoh and his traits?
I don't know about his traits. What we're saying is that There are humane dictators and unhumane dictators. There are harsh dictators and humane dictators. You can be a dictator and get everybody to work with you, or you can be a very disruptive kind of person, a person that's very difficult to get along with, make unfair demands. I think the way the Torah is viewing Pharaoh is he's making unfair demands upon the Jewish people. I think inherently there may be nothing wrong with having a people who needs to work for you. That's what kings did. That's what pharaohs did. That's what dictators do. But Pharaoh goes, according to what the Medrash is saying, Pharaoh goes and kind of takes it to the nth degree, the gusto. I'm going to just kind of squeeze every drop of blood out of them, so to speak. And so you have the situation where he's not only having them work, he's killing off baby boys. Now that's really going beyond what he needs to do. Now you could argue, well, he had some soothsayer tell him that there was going to be a leader of the Jewish people, and therefore he didn't know who it was. He killed off the babies. The bottom line is they're going around killing Jewish babies. The way the Medrash sees Pharaoh, he's very wily. Pharaoh comes into power, and there's been this guy Joseph, who is back a number of generations, who saved the country. He can't go out and say kill Jews. He can't just simply set up a whole system of final solution. He has to kind of figure out ways to do it. So first he makes them pay a high tax. Then he has them go in slavery. And then he says, and you know what, and he gets the midwives, the Egyptian midwives, and says, when you give birth and it's a baby boy, just don't tell anybody, just bang the head in. And pretend it was an accident. And then tells other people. So slowly he gets everybody into the mood of being anti-Semitic against the Jewish people.
So I have my answer. He transforms. He goes from the ultimate exploiter to a murderer.
Well, he becomes an exploiter. The ultimate exploiter is a murderer. In other words, why? Because he's exploiting the people.
If you exploit
he wants to.
You're a murderer.
Okay.
He's taking advantage of the person.
All right. Let's not argue on the words. Okay. Good. In other words, but there's an intent here in a wily kind of way to kind of reduce or eliminate the Jewish people. That's how the Medrash views Pharaoh. Now that's not what his role in history was meant to be. His role in history was meant to be the Jewish people moved in, you want to enslave them, God said that's part of the process until they come out, but there's a limit. So either he's punished for that, or the fact that he had opportunities, now that's taken away from him. And then when that happens, so part of the punishment, let me just read another line and I'll try to explain this a little more. Then God hardened his heart that he would be able to praise God, or everybody would praise God's power. And I'll be seen in front of a lot of nations. We'll see exactly what I was. So in other words, part of what this is saying here, and this is I think the radical part that we sometimes miss if we read this, is that part of a punishment that God can give is to take away your free will. That's actually a fairly radical statement. I have free will, but at some point I lose my free will.
Does that circumvent nature?
God can circumvent. Part of my punishment is to circumvent my nature. Part of my punishment can be physical. Part of my punishment can be financial. Part of my punishment can be spiritual in the world to come. Part of my punishment can be I lose the ability to act as a rational person, making my own free choice. That's an unusual kind of punishment. It's a punishment that it's hard for us to imagine because we don't know what our free will choices are. We all know that we're limited in what our free will is. I can't become an astrophysicist right now. I could, but it would.
But are you losing all your free choice, or only losing the positive free choice?
He's losing the free choice of letting the Jewish people go.
Only the good stuff.
Well,
but
you know what?
can do all the negative stuff.
We can argue back and forth. If God takes away the free choice for Pharaoh, is it only free choice of letting the Jewish people go out free to do the right thing, or is it doing all the right things? Does he internalize himself and become more, wound up within his own life? What goes on in the palace? Anything that's good is bad. What it means is part of the punishment is he loses his ability to have his own free will, which is the unique feature of the human beings. And I've said this before. To make any choice. Yeah. To make any choice. We have a tremendously developed brain. Part of the ability of our cerebrum, is to be able to think abstractly. Part of thinking abstractly is making choices, not just because we're adding up numbers for dinner, but we're just trying to do what's right and what's wrong. Those are choices that we make.
What are you saying? Did he kill his free will to do good?
He kills God kills his free will. God takes away his free will temporarily until he lets until plague number 10 plays out.
So now he's a robot, is that what you're saying?
So now, no, or...
No, I'm thinking of it reminds me, it was like the parallel of an alcoholic who sees his life, his family, and everything spiraling out of control, and he knows that, and he can see that it's happening, but he can't stop it. And that's the punishment. Pharaoh sees his whole country in major financial difficulties. We talk about the great financial crisis.
Right.
And he can't do anything about it.
No,
There's
but
something inside of him that is stopping him from being able to make the rational decision.
No, but the alcoholic can stop himself. He can say, I'm not going to drink anymore.
So the answer is,
while the process of the alcoholic being there, he's in great pain.
Yeah.
So I can argue this two ways. I can argue this that the Almighty has taken away completely his ability to say yes, that yes go out. That's removed from his choices, or God has changed the balance. It's no longer that you say, well, maybe yes, maybe no. It's more mostly no, but there's still a yes at the bottom of the scale. In other words, he's changed where the equilibrium is.
Okay.
So that to harden the heart does not mean to remove the emotions completely. You've just changed where that balance point is. So Pharaoh, you got to work really hard now to find the middle ground that you can make a real rational choice. Because whereas it used to be here now it's all the way over here.
Harden the heart. So I'm thinking, the problem...
Heart is emotion.
The problem when you read he and all this stuff, it's so anthropomorphic.
Yes.
It's hard. So what, this force called God goes into Pharaoh's system and gives him this irritation
Correct.
to keep on going. And that's what this is. This is Hashem going into a person's will and making him continue to be evil.
Okay, well, I think we can understand it without God for a moment. We've had relationships, people have relationships that deteriorate. And people get so wound up when those relationships deteriorate and they can't seem to see things rationally.
Yes.
Right? And that's the same thing as hardening your heart. Only that's not God, that's the person hardens their own heart. So sometimes, what God has done here is he's come in and helped that along. That Pharaoh, you've decided in the first 5 plagues that you're not going to let the Jewish people go, and you had the ability to make that decision. But now that you've done that and you wound yourself up, I'm going to really wind you up. I'm going to wind you up really tight that you can't unwind. The same way that if I hate someone, I've got this vendetta, I can no longer see good in the person. I think the person did something bad to me. No matter what the person will do, no matter how much honey he's going to bring to me, I won't see anything else except the sting.
Do we have anywhere else in the Torah where Hashem hardens a person's heart? Or is Pharaoh really the only one?
I think Pharaoh's the only one.
Discusses.
I think Pharaoh's the only one. That's when you ask me about, does God do this to anyone else? This is the only case that comes up. The only one that I can think of.
This is very harsh.
Right.
It's like Noah's story, saying that I will never do this again.
Never.
You mean the flood?
The flood, yes. And he says that the same thing.
Well, God does not say he will not. God says
he did it. And after that, he said, "I will never do this."
Well, God does not say he will never do this again.
No, but this is the lesson.
The Pharaoh story. Story.
But we don't hear about it anymore.
Correct. Okay. Anyways, let me finish up this with Ramban. V'Hashamar kodma makot, and therefore what Hashem says to Moshe before the makot, that he's now going to harden Pharaoh's heart, even though it's not yet now. I'm going to harden his heart, he won't let the people go. God is telling Moshe what will happen in the last 5 plagues. I know he's not going to let you go. And this is the reason, this is the reason why he's going to harden Pharaoh's heart. Once Pharaoh has said no in the first 5, I'm going to harden his heart, and you get to see the whole play. Why? Because with the last 5 plagues and the same thing with splitting the seas is Vaychazek Hashem, God hardens Pharaoh's heart. Kilev melech biyad Hashem al kol asher chapos yatzer. And he quotes here a pasuk in Mishlei in the book of Proverbs that the heart of a king is in the hand of God. On everything he wants to do, God will turn it. As if to say God is the ultimate ruler of rulers. In an age where there was absolute rule by absolute dictators and absolute kings had the absolute rule of power. There still was a God who was the absolute of the absolute. So therefore, that's maybe why it happens on Pharaoh, because Pharaoh is a ruler, and God wants to show that all rulers are really going to be subservient to him in the bottom line. Okay? Good piece so far?
Yeah.
Okay. There's more Rambans to do, but I think I want to do an Siva Shalom with you guys. Okay?
One question,
Sure.
before you start, if you don't mind. If you guys don't mind. A lot of things bother me here, okay?
That's
I
good.
believe it all, but it bothers me.
That's good.
Like Hashem is against Pharaoh, and I get it, the worst guy ever. But so many times dictators have killed us. And Hashem,
True.
This was the prototype.
Nebuchadnezzar,
The prototype.
and Ferdinand and Isabella,
Yeah.
and I can name you 10.
Correct.
So why? What's the story there? I don't understand this.
So there are times when God is visible, and when God's presence is hidden. What we call Hester Ponim. And during the time of the story of the Bible, God's presence is more visible and more directly seen. After that, it's less seen. We have to look to find it. We have to look to identify it. We don't see it. So there are rulers who do things bad to us, and God does not show up and save the day. But He does save the people. We've talked about this, individuals versus people.
It doesn't mess with me.
Right. We'd like to live in an age where we see God say, Yahoo, bad guys lose. You're right, we
After
don't.
a while I would.
Yeah.
I mean, Hitler did lose at the end.
Hitler did lose at the end, and so did Isabel and Ferdinand are not here, and we are here, and the Babylonians are not here.
But look what the destruction we went through. I don't know. It's a mystery.
Okay.
Okay.
We don't have a better
That's
answer for this
my
one.
say.
There you go. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I got a piece of the Siva Shalom. It's a bit of a longer piece. It is on page Mem. I think it's the last piece. It should be about 5 or 6 pages for the end. Let me try to get this one. Okay, page is a little fuzzy. There's a little one more page.
What's the...
Inyan HaMakot.
There. Okay.
There you go. You got it? Yeah. Okay. So let's see, before we start this, to make this easier, who can rattle off for me the 10 plagues?
Dam,
Tzfadeh, Kinim, okay. Arov, Dever, Shvin, Barad, Arbe, Choshech, Makas, Makos. Do we know what they are? Or that was just what you say in Pesach night? Dam Tzfadeh, Kinim is blood, frogs, and lice. Correct? Okay. Dam Tzfadeh, Kinim, Arov are wild animals. Dever is cattle disease. Shvin is boils. Okay, Dam Tzfadeh, Kinim, Arov, Dever, Shvin. Barad is locust. Barad is hail, Arba is locust, and Choshech is darkness, and then the last one is Makat B'chorot. Okay, so I'm just going to give you the beginning of this, which is actually not from the Siva Shalom. He's actually quoting other sources. I know Maral uses this. He says as follows, and this, if you hear this alone, it was worth it if you just come today. The first 3 plagues are actually deal with the stuff that's below human existence, right? They deal with the stuff in the water and in the dirt. This is a very simple explanation. Dam Tzfadeh Kinim, blood, the frogs, and Kinim are lice. So the blood comes, where was the blood affecting? The water coming from the Nile. Tzfadeh is the frog. Where the frogs come from, they jumped out of the Nile. Right? And the Kinim, the lice, they take the dirt of the ground, dust of the ground, they turn it into the lice. These are all things that are below us, like down here. Okay? Dam Tzfadeh Kinim. Arov, Dever, Shvin. Arov are wild animals. Dever is cattle disease, and Shvin are boils. These are all things that affect us directly, where we see animals. In other words, right in front of us. They're in our sphere of reality, of seeing them. They're in this world. In other words, the first 3 are like below us physically. They're in the dirt, in the water, in the dirt. The next 3 are really right in front of me. The animals, animal disease, and boils on my body. Okay. The next 3, this is 7, 8, 9, are about what I did. Barad is hail. Arbe are locusts, and the third is Choshech, darkness. Those all come from the sky. The Arbe fly in, the darkness gets dark. Which one did I miss? Where did I skip one? Barad is the hail. The hail comes from down, the locusts come from the sky, and the Choshech is the sky turns dark. And the last one, the ultimate one, is Makat B'chorot. That attacks the human being very directly. It attacks everything. Death is death. So in other words, the basic point of it, there are three different spheres that are happening. There's lowest, middle, and high that the Almighty is showing He has control over. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
And that's why I said, once you got to the 10 plagues, you see that there is simply a pattern. These aren't simply random. If you go through that list, you see that the Almighty is trying to show that He controls. The Almighty controls everything in this world. The lowest spheres, the middle sphere, and the higher spheres. The dirt, the human existence area, and the sky, and everything, including life, is all under the control of the Almighty. Now, the question that I asked before, now you'll understand that, is, well, what would have happened if Jewish people got it after plague 4, 3, 6? You wouldn't have seen that. But assuming that we know that they're going to stay for the full 10, then you see that the plan is not just to bring plagues, random plagues on Pharaoh. The plan is actually to really show that the Almighty controls everything.
Did the whole world know of the plagues?
Assuming yes. The whole world knows the Jewish people got out of Egypt.
How come they didn't write about it when there was writing?
So people don't write about things that are bad to them. Peoples did not record losses.
I understand the Egyptians because they were the losers, but what about the rest of the world? Who heard of it?
Didn't bother them. It's not a global society like we live in today.
There are Egyptian writings that describe the plagues.
Right. There's one answer. Okay, thank you, Ezra.
What was the answer?
There's Egyptian writings that mention plagues.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get them. We'll get some for next class or for next week.
Okay,
Maybe.
I have an email.
You have an email for me? Well, we'll roll it over to next week. Is that okay? All right, because next week is still the 10 plagues. We're good. How many plagues are there in next week's parsha?
2,
3. Okay, so we got 7 this week, 7, 3 next week. Okay, anyways, let's go into the Ramban, into the Nesiva Shalom. So the first half of the Nesiva Shalom is actually really not. It's not. I want to check out the right one. Yeah. Yes. Okay. I was on the wrong page. I'm on the wrong page. But I just gave you guys the right page. Just turned to the wrong page. Give me a sec. What page did I say it's on? Yeah. Yes. Okay. Good. All right. There you go. Okay. So the first half of this Nesiva Shalom is really not Chasidus as much as it really is just interpreting the plagues, which actually makes it very good to go through. So I'm going to read again. So Torah Seinah Kadoshah, this is where the Aleph is. Inyan HaMakot. Yes, Inyan HaMakot. I'm sorry that the first page is a little unfocused. Torah Seinah Kadoshah, Hi Torah Chayim Lavota Derech Asher Yochabo. Our holy Torah is the way that shows us the way we're going to go. Inyan Sharicha Torah Ko Harbe B'chol Yonei Tzit Mitzrayim. It shows us the way through coming out. The reason the Torah spent a long time talking about coming out of Egypt is not because that's a historical fact. The fact that we got out of Egypt has a universal, continual application. It's not simply a story in the past. It teaches us a lesson for all of the future existence of our people and who we are. And it says, the pasuk says God took us out of Egypt. That for every generation we're supposed to remember coming out of Egypt, not just as a people, every individual. And as it says, the Maharal writes in Gvor Hashem, God didn't just look at that generation when He took us out, according to the Maharal. The message of coming out of Egypt is a message for every Jew from every different era and every time. And therefore we have to explain every simple detail of the Torah gives to us in coming out of Egypt. So therefore, why do you need 10 plagues? Why didn't God just kind of go all the way to the end and just do Makat B'chor? If that was the one that was going to get us out, why did you need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9? Why not just bring out your heavy hitter, right? Bring out your power slugger and knock the ball out of the park? Why just do Makat B'chor? All the 10 therefore have validity. And this is what I just told you before. V'yesh lomar al pi ma'di'isa b'sefer HaKadoshim. This is what it says in the holy books. L'va'er divrei Gemara. What the Gemara says that Rabbi Yehuda said, Hayanosem bohem simanim. We say it in the Haggadah. After listing the 10 plagues, we say that Rabbi Yehuda gave them a sign. Tetzach adash bi'achav. He took the 10 plagues and broke them into 1, 2, 3 abbreviation, 4, 5, 6 abbreviation, 7, 8, 9, 10 abbreviation. Tetzach adash bi'achav. So who cares? Says the Nesiva Shalom. Ma mosip edvarim elu. What does he really add? What do the abbreviation of these 3 abbreviations, Tetzach, Dam Tzvadei Kinim, and so forth, really teach us? Ela Rabbi Yehuda Machadesh Yasar Makot Nechleket Legimel Chalakim. What Rabbi Yehuda is telling us that we have in the Haggadah that says Rabbi Yehuda says that with 3 signs, Tetzach Adash Bi'achav, which is the abbreviations. Did I do this too fast? Tetzach Adash Bi'achav are the abbreviations of the 10 plagues. Tetzach Dam Tzvadei Kinim, right? Rov Dever Shchin Barar Arba Choshech Makas Bechoros. Bechoros is the bet. So he's telling us that you break up the 10 plagues into 3 groups. You could have thought you broke them into 2 groups. You could have thought they weren't all united. They're really 3 separate groups. The Gimel Chalakim, Tetzach, Dam, Tzvadei Kinim, Shehein Matachat Ladamar. The first 3 are below the ground. Adash, the next ones, 4, 5, 6. Arov, Dever, Shchin, Shehein Al Ha'adamah, are on the ground, above the ground, where we normally come into contact with. Bebriot, Hamalchot Pnei Arts, Anashim, Behemot, V'chayot, like it happens to animals that we are right in our sphere of existence, or wild animals. Ubachav, and the last 4, which is Barad, Arba, Choshech, and Makat B'chorot, Hein Ba'avir Shemayim L'mala Mi'apnim Pnei Adamah. It's in the sky itself, in the heavens. V'zeh hayan yan neser makot. Kiparo Amar, because Paro said, Mi Hashem. He says, who is Hashem? That's what Paro says, quote. He says, Lo yadati et Hashem, I don't know Hashem. Hainu shekafar b'havaya. He denied God. Uvanagoyit barach b'chol ke'abriyailu. He denied that God rules over the entire world. He lives in a multiplicity of polytheistic beliefs. Different idols, different things are controlled by different gods. One God that controls everything is too much for Pharaoh to accept. Therefore God showed Pharaoh the 10 plagues in all the 3 different parts of existence, below us, in front of us, and on top of us. It's a compendium, a completion of all the existence that we see in the physical world. Every time that the plagues are introduced, and the triads are introduced, in plague number 1, Moshe says, I'm going to tell you, K'ani Hashem. In Dam, in the first Makkah, it says, Bezoti da K'ani Hashem. In plague number 1, Moses says to Pharaoh, with this you'll see that God is God, that I'm God. God says I'm God. Hainu she'eralo HaKadosh Baruch Hu shebezoti da shemitachad lefanai shetach K'ani Hashem. God says, you'll see in front of me, whatever this, the playing field is, I control. This is the response to Paro says, I don't know Hashem. So Moses says here, this is Hashem. He's going to turn the water into blood. In the first triad, in the plague of blood. In the second triad, in the second triad of plagues, this is which is Adash, Arov, the wild animals, it says Lamante da K'ani Hashem B'karvards. God says, now you know that I'm God in the midst of the land. You'll know that I control everything. In this playing field that's in front of you, where the animals are running, I'm controlling it. And the same in the last triad, the last 4 makot, which is a separate group, which is Barad, hail. It says Moses says to Pharaoh, you'll see that there's none like me in the whole world. God, Paro says, who is Hashem? Lo yadati Hashem, I don't know Hashem. So God showed him, God, Pharaoh said, Moshe says, I'll show you, Pharaoh, that God controls everything, all facets of creation. Besides what's in front of him, in this playing field, below and above and here in front of us, there's nothing that God doesn't control. The same thing below us, the same thing above us. Whether it's mitachas l'shetach, al pnei shetach, or lamala ba'avir, b'chol ha'yekum ein od milvado. The only one that rules it all is one God. So therefore, the whole thing is one big piece with 3 different areas to show that God controls the entire existence of this world. All the material, all the physical existences is controlled by the Almighty. That's a radical statement for the ancient world. Because they all had different gods for different things. One God who is amorphous, one God who controls everything that they couldn't understand. That's why it was the lesson of Pharaoh. Okay.
It seems that they still don't understand that.
Well, actually, they do understand that, because most of the modern faiths do believe in one God.
They do, so how come they keep persecuting the Jews then?
So they don't understand the role the Jewish people play. But most of the modern faiths, but let's say specifically Christianity has a trinity, but it's primarily three parts of one God.
Yeah.
And Islam is a monotheistic religion. They have gotten beyond the old-time polytheistic idol worship. Now there are still, some religions that do have a multiplicity of gods. Okay, the indigenous people in this continent.
I'm talking strictly about the ones that do know about God.
So they,
like the Pope, for example, he knows about God, right?
So that's based upon, of course, why the New Testament creates a sense of continuity, a rejection of the Old Testament, and the Jewish people are the ones who are cursed. They're damned for eternity because they rejected Jesus. That's part of the
same book.
But they did read the same book, but they built another book after it.
Okay.
So another book comes along to replace our book. That's why it's so important for them to have a New Testament as well as the Old Testament.
Right. That doesn't make sense.
We know Hashem kept Moshe alive.
Right.
What was Pharaoh's reason for not killing him? That he become a martyr? Do we know? Because I find that fascinating that he didn't try to kill Moses.
Yeah.
Moses comes to him, the most powerful man in the world. He gets to live.
So the best I can understand it is, I don't know what happens today in modern warfare, but when you read about World War II and they want to negotiate surrender, they'd send a person out with a white flag, right? They send someone representative of each side to come and discuss and meet and talk, and then they'd go back and if it wouldn't work out, they'd go back and the next day they were back at each other's throats, killing each other, shooting each other. So how come they didn't kill the guy? So that was the understanding that somehow the representative was accepted. How's it that people we can have conferences of countries that hate each other, but nonetheless they can manage to talk to each other at a political conference?
And Pharaoh was not a brute; he was an intellectual.
I'm sorry?
Pharaoh was not a brute; just
we also
for there for blood.
Well,
he killed because he had the fear.
Right.
He had the reason. Never said it.
Right. I mean, the question really is why does he not put Moses back to work? So Moses was a member of the royal household. So how is it that Aaron is not working?
The priest didn't work.
So the answer is it looks like the priest did not work. There was always the sacred tribe of Levi, which Aaron is a Levi, who were excused from some kind of labor. So in other words, even Pharaoh recognized that every people has their own sacred group. And therefore, if we believe that the Levium were the ones who worked later in the Mishkan and so forth, it may have been the Levium were not really fully enslaved. So Aaron had the right to come to the palace. So he was doing nothing wrong. He just says, "I'm just a translator. I'm just a spokesman," and yet he wasn't really AWOL from working in the alluvial pits. And Moses was viewed as really a political representative, the people's leader. So I guess if you're killing him, as you said, you could turn him into a martyr. Or Pharaoh may be concerned that if you got rid of Moses, there would be another Moses show up.
Thank God for us.
Well, true. Well, why? Because God would have found another Moses, maybe. But by the way, the key to Moses, of course, you realize is that he's raised in the palace of Pharaoh. He's not only is there irony.
He knows their culture.
Not only is there irony that he's raised under Pharaoh's nose, but he knows their culture, and more importantly, to be a leader, you have to have tasted freedom. You could not expect the true internal leader to come from a group of slaves. Slave rebellions are never fully successful, but Moses, who had understood what culture was, and what freedom was, and what life was about without being enslaved day and night, could understand and have a broader vision, which made God find him to be the right receptor for his message to come to Pharaoh. Good question. Yeah?
Oh, so are you continuing on?
I am continuing on, but I'll take a question.
Well, okay, so my question was the way you described the triad, then, which was really great. But you described the Makos Bechoros as that transcendent one.
Right.
It was like
well, it's not.
three.
Well, I guess you could say it's more high too. The main angel of death comes flying down from the sky. Okay.
Because that's different than what you described.
Right. Okay. So I kind of hedge back and forth in both ways to describe it, only because the Makat Bechorot is the one that kind of just makes cracks Pharaoh.
Okay.
But of course, you could argue that Pharaoh didn't crack. The reason that Pharaoh let the Jewish people go because God ordained that they would go at the end of plague number 10. When Moshe comes to Pharaoh and says, he basically says, the next plague you're going to let us go, that becomes therefore the fruition of God's command. But yeah, you could put the last four together as all coming from sky, heaven, spiritual heaven, and so forth. I remember the picture of the old Ten Commandments movie where that kind of cloud would fly through the air.
That's right, green.
I don't remember. Okay, maybe I watched it on a black and white TV. I don't remember anymore. At any rate, yeah, that's a good. It's a valid approach. Okay, so this is about the three different approaches. We'll do one more paragraph. We'll take a break, and then we'll want to finish up. Come back and do this a little more. Okay. And we find a similar kind of thing with this. Medrash kind of splits it in three different ways, in a different way. That divides the plagues, and the three Gimai de Aaron, Gimai de Moshe, and Gimai de HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Three are done by Aaron, three are done by Moshe, three are done by the Almighty. V'yachat kulam, and one is done by all of them. It's not the same triad division. But the Medrash simply says that, if you look, there are three groups. Dam tzvardei kinim. The first three actually are one division, one triad. The first three are Shahayim Ba'aretz Aidei Aaron, are done by Aaron. And that the Medrash already points out the reason Moses doesn't do the three is because Moses was saved in the Nile, and the dirt hid the Egyptians, so Moses therefore didn't want to do the first three. But Aaron does the first three, that's true. Bared Arba Choshech. The hail, locust, and darkness are done through Moshe. They're in the Avir, in the sky. Shekach shalat Moshe Barzil Shemaim. Moshe controlled, or Moshe was able to have power on the ground and on the heavens. Arov Dever and Makat Bechorot. Arov, the wild animals, the animal disease, and the plague of the firstborn was done by God. There is actually nowhere that Moses does it. Moses comes to Pharaoh and says, tomorrow this will be done. Moses does not raise his hand. Aaron does not raise his hand or his staff. God simply does these three. And v'shchin aidei kulam. And when you look at the shchin, it seems to include all three, Moses, Aaron, and God himself. The shchin is the boils. V'chein matzina b'lashon haktuvim. And so you find this as well in the psukim. The begimel makot rishonot shayu ba'aretz. When the first three plagues that were on the ground, k'tiv v'makadam v'natayu put your hand over the waters of Mitzrayim, on the rivers, the Niles, the canals, and on the swamps. Makat Tzvardeya, it says Netei Yodcha B'Matecha Al Narot Ayorim V'Alagamim. Tzvardeya, same thing. Put your hand out over the rivers, the canals, and the swamps. V'chein Makat Kinim, the same thing with the Kinim, the lice. Netei Matcha V'Hachat Faras, hit the dust of the ground. That's the first three, so those three are done on the Aretz. Makot Achronot, the last three Makot, Shoidei Moshe, which was done by Moshe. Why? Because he is able to control the air as well. It says K'tiv Machat Barad V'Choshech Netei Yodcha L'Shamayim. It says put your hand over the heavens. With Makat Barad, which is the plague of hail and the plague of darkness. God says to Moses, put your hand over the heaven. Rashi says in the Medrash Agada, She'igbiya HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe L'malam HaShamayim. God raised Moshe above the heavens, so to speak. He took him out into space, and he said, put your hands over the heavens. V'zeh Shamar Lo Netei Yodcha L'Shamayim. Ki Hayah L'malam Mikipat HaShamayim V'Shamayim L'mat Mirenu. God took him out, he was above the heavens. And the same thing, the Chazina Gam Shebmeder in Medrash, you see from this Medrash, Shesar Makot Mechulakot Legimel B'chinot B'chol Kal Gebriah. The same thing is divided three ways. V'hu Adat should be honored Mama Rabbi Yehuda, similarly to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda broke them up differently, below, middle, and high. But here it's the same thing. Just different Makot are identified. You have the Makot that are coming from the ground, you have the Makot that are coming from the sky, and then you have those that the Almighty does Himself. V'hine Adat should be honored Mama Rabbi Yehuda. Gimel Sugei Makot. The Rishon B'tachat Pnei Aretz. Adash is B'nivrim and Nitzal Pnei Aretz. Makot Achronot is Hayu Al Shemaim L'malam and Aretz. In order to show that God controls everything. So once again, the way that this approach in the Medrash is, it's not as neat and tidy of three different triads, below, middle, and above. It's about who does them. 3 by Moses, 3 by Aaron, and 3 by God. But the reality is that it's fairly similar. The 3 done by Aaron tend to be over the lower parts. 3 done by Moses, they're not the next 3. They tend to be the stuff in the heavens. And then the 3 done by God are all over the rest of the thing. Once again, showing that God controls everything. Okay, so once again, it's telling us the whole key that there are 3 different ways in which God controls the world. And He's going to bring now an analogy to bring it down to us, how we relate to the Almighty. So this is a good place for us to take our 5-minute break. Okay, roll the trailer, and we'll come back and finish this up afterwards. So what we saw so far, when we last left our heroes in our last episode, we saw the fact that there were 3 different triads of Makot. We saw a way to divide to Moses, Aaron, and God. But basically that the God is controlling everything. The theme of having this 10 is always a good number to work with, shows that this is not simply a one-shot deal, but the Almighty controls a lot. And there are 3 different ways that the Almighty controls it and shows His ability to be in charge of everything in the world. So now he applies this to ourselves, and so this is a little bit of like maybe Hasidus, or maybe almost inter Hasidus. And of course, the premise is, by the way, that these 10 plagues are not just 10 plagues for Pharaoh, not just for the Jewish people to get out of Egypt. It's a message for us. And the whole key to this premise of Nesivas Shalom is whatever happened then has application to us. So now, not that I'm Pharaoh, and not that I'm going to have all these 10 plagues, but the lesson of the 10 plagues is an application to me as an individual person, as well as a member of the Jewish faith community. Not just historically this happened to my ancestors, that's a history lesson. But what the values that happen here are values that become inscribed in what I do to relate to the Almighty, or how the Almighty relates to me. And the fact that these makot are now the primary values, basic foundational values of our beliefs, so I can divide it in 3 different ways as well. There are 3 different types, or 3 different parts or levels of emunah. And I'm going to try to explain this as best I can. Emunat hamoach, emunat halev, emunat ha'evarim. There is belief, there's intellectual belief, intellectual emunah. There is emotional emunah, and then there is emunah that's part of what we normally do without even thinking. Like we run to do something without even really forcefully or intellectually or even emotionally knowing what we want to do. There's certain things we do like on autopilot. Like you get in your car and you drive to work. You're not even conscious of making the right turns and left turns and so forth. That's just like the Ivarim are working. Your hands are working the wheel, your feet are working the gas pedal. So when you wake up in the morning, you get too used to Shabbat, you get used to kosher. Certain things just knee-jerk responses. So, on the other hand, there is intellectual thinking this out. There is as well emotional. Lev is not the pulmonary system or cardiac system. It's really meant to be the emotional system. So when he explains what they are, through the intellectual emunah, through your mind, you realize that there's nothing else here in God. And sometimes intellectual is really good.